Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. This is Holly Berner from Optimity Advisors, and I am here to welcome you to a webinar we're presenting today about doing DAM, or Digital Asset Management, right. Very quickly, first I wanted to go through a high-level agenda of what today's webinar is going to encompass. First off, introduction. We'll do a few little quick housekeeping tips around the webinar. Then we're going to jump right into whether or not, asking a sort of basic question about whether or not you may already be doing digital asset management or DAM. From there, look at 10 quick tips that we at Optimity have and love to be able to share in terms of how do you approach doing DAM right. And then finally, we want to reserve the last 15 minutes of the webinar for any questions and answers that you may have as audience members. And on that topic of questions and answers, I did want to, on the housekeeping level, point out something very quickly. As you logged in, I'm sure you saw on the control panel from the webinar, there is an area there where you can submit questions and answers. So at any point over the course of the webinar, please go ahead and type in any questions. And like I said, we'll be sure to try and get to them as much as time allows towards the end of the session. The other thing I wanted to make sure everybody else was aware of as we go into things is this webinar is being recorded. And again, thank you so much for participating in it. At the conclusion of it, we will be sending out a link to the webinar so you'll be able to watch it or rewatch it as helpful going forward. Thank you so much. And with that, I think we want to jump into things a little bit. First off, again, just high-level introductions. Again, my name is Holly. I'm a senior manager here with Optimity Advisors. My background, I have a pretty deep background working in digital asset management and information management in the industry for a little over 15 years. I've worked with a number of different media, retail, and CPG organizations in both the consulting and on-the-ground capacity. I've done a lot of work scoping and implementing different DAM strategies, technologies, workflow solutions around all of that. And so love to be able to bring some of that knowledge to bear to everyone and put it out there a little bit. So that's me. But with that behind us, let's ask the big question. Are you already doing DAM? Are you already doing digital asset management? Chances are, if you and your organization work with creative digital assets in any capacity, then yes, you probably are already doing digital asset management. The question is that, sometimes it's worth putting a little bit of a pause and just making sure we're all on the same page as to even really understanding what we mean by digital asset management. And to do that, the first point of entry is to understand what we mean by digital assets. And for the sake of this conversation today, we want to be very clear in describing and defining digital assets as really any type of rich media file. So that could be anything from a logo file, an illustration, a product image, an audio clip, a video clip, photography, really any sort of digital or media file. There are times where digital assets may extend to even more traditional documents like PowerPoint or Word or Excel files. In the event creative or media is sort of being discussed, so for an example, a Word document that is a creative brief, or a PowerPoint deck that summarizes, creative rules and asset rules for different objectives. So that definition of what our digital assets can expand and contract depending on what you're looking to do or how you're looking to work with your files. But really, at the end of the day, we're talking about creative media files. So as you're talking about these files, how do digital assets then extend into digital asset management? Again, we just want to be very clear, digital asset management is that larger program and approach for managing these types of files. Typically, we see four main pillars all rolling up into that digital asset management program. First, we really like to think about and talk about asset workflows. So what are all the different flows and touch points and processes in which assets are created, approved, reviewed, put out back into the world, reported on, revised, iterated, etc. So what are the different workflows and touch points and people and processes intersecting with assets within a particular environment? The second big pillar that we like to talk about and think about in relation to digital asset management is, of course, your metadata and information strategy. So what are the different categories and concepts and descriptors and data points that are being used to describe your assets, categorize your assets, provide insight into how they're being used, provide insight into analytics and reporting, all those different data points and information points that allow you to kind of sling and arrange and protect your assets and meet your different business objectives for those assets. The third big pillar that we like to talk about is the technology system. So chances are, if you're working with digital assets, you're using technology to do so. There really can be a range of different types of systems and applications that you're using in relation to your digital assets, and it's important to think about all of those systems from an almost ecosystem perspective and how they all intersect and how those different types of technology are used to complement doing what you need to do with your assets to create them, improve them, get them out into the world, etc. And then finally, sitting across all of that, the fourth big pillar that we always like to think about in relation to the digital asset management program is just general oversight and governance. So as an organization or an environment is going down this road of understanding and building a proactive program around digital asset management, what's that big picture? How is that program understood in relation to larger, bigger business strategy and business goals? And also, what are the different mechanisms and committees and rules and processes and programs put into place to manage the digital asset management program to ensure that it really intersects with and complements overall business strategy ability to evolve over time. So those, again, are the big four things we always want to talk about when we're talking about a DAM program. So thinking about those two things, what are digital assets, what is digital asset management, and going back to that initial question of, well, are you doing DAM? Again, I think in talking about those four different pillars of DAM, those are good examples of how you can do DAM well. In addition to just doing DAM in a passive way, which sometimes may be the case in different organizations. But again, those are all, we love to talk about those four pillars, and we love to talk about how to use them all in an intersecting way to really complement what you need to do with your digital assets. But even in addition to that, we think it's really helpful and important to take a step back and think a little bit more broadly around what it means to do DAM, and think about what are some different rules for the road to really ensure that you're doing DAM right. And so to do that, we really want to focus on 10 quick tips that we have at Optimity, really all born around doing DAM right. At a high level, they are, starting from about 10 o'clock on the left, making the business case, thinking beyond the here and now, using the right tool for the job, don't collect, curate, using DAM, approaching DAM as a human endeavor, evangelizing, not just evangelizing in order to socialize, understanding DAM in the larger information ecosystem, understanding how digital assets equal brand equity, understanding how your brand's building block for customer experience is tied to DAM, and then finally achieving DAM maturity in stages. So let's look at all of those in a little bit more detail. First off, a great place to start, making the business case. I'm sure a number of you on this webinar are coming at DAM. You may be at a variety of different points of maturity on your DAM roadmap. Maybe you're brand new to it. Maybe you've had a program up and running for the last 20 years. Regardless, it's so important to always be thinking about what that business case is for your program, understanding how DAM sits in the context of your larger business and operational goals, and understanding how you can make and demonstrate that strategy and add value over time, because DAM is something that's going to require ongoing investment and ongoing attention and proactive care. So it's never enough to make the business case on day one, launch a program, and hope for the best. You're going to want to make sure that making the business case remains first and foremost in your mind and part of the program's objectives over time. Second, thinking beyond the here and now. As part of that business case, it's so important to think about how DAM really sits in a wider context and what are the wider questions. Not just even from your business and the industry in which you operate, but just even broader trends. What are the hot topics? Is it cybersecurity? Is it all the, over the last 3 years, the proliferation of audience channels? Is it new buzzy things like the Internet of Things? Dam potentially may intersect or bump up or have to wrestle with any one of these things, and it's very important to always be thinking about that wider context in relation to your digital asset management program in order to anticipate and potentially exploit the different opportunities and intersection points that they may present. Next up, using the right tool for the job. So this really goes back to one of those earlier pillars we were talking about in technology. When you're talking about creative assets, rich media file assets, there's really a plethora, a universe of different technology applications and tools, pure play DAM systems, workflow systems, project management systems, individual creative applications. All of these things can be used and used very well in relation to what you're looking to do with digital asset management. The most important thing, though, is to make sure you're using the right tool for the job. So understand your use cases, understand what you're looking to achieve. There's no need to bite off more than you can chew or invest in major technology ecosystems if you're looking to do something relatively simple. So always be very true to understanding where you're at, what your digital assets are, what you're looking to do with them, and scale appropriately in terms of what the tools are and technology solutions are that you're going to be deploying in relation to your digital asset management program. The next one, don't collect, curate. This is a fun one. It's really easy when you sit down and start going after digital asset management to give into the temptation to try and collect and hold everything together in one big DAM solution and manage it over time. But really, that is something you most likely would want to avoid. Digital asset management is very easy to allow it to turn into digital hoarding. And unfortunately, a lot of, that's ultimately a goal of a DAM program is often put into place to counteract and to prevent against and buttress against digital hoarding and runaway collections of assets being maintained on different disparate locations and servers and hard drives. So when you're talking about a digital asset management program, you're talking about a repository or a single source of truth. It's so important to really make decisions and understand and think about collecting those assets and managing those assets from a curation perspective. You don't want to just throw everything under the sun, and doing so will only require additional resources in both time, effort, and system power in order to manage them. And ultimately, you'll end up creating a huge collection that may not be very useful to its audiences. So the more you can approach digital asset management from a curation perspective, put on that hat, and make some decisions around what is truly of value, what is truly an asset to a particular organization, the better off you're going to be. The next one we'd like to talk about is just reminding everybody that DAM is actually a human endeavor. It's very easy to think about and to look towards DAM as a one-stop shop solution that will introduce all sorts of efficiencies and automations and eliminate all sorts of redundant activity and storage locations. And all of those things are great. And all of those things are things that DAM is very capable of doing. And certainly efficiency is a huge benefit of operational efficiency is a huge benefit of any sort of well-implemented and pursued DAM program. All that said, it's important to keep in mind that it's not going to be a magic bullet. DAM is never going to be the solution where you put it in place, hit the magic red button, and walk away, and it will take care of itself for the next 20 years. DAM requires human insight. DAM requires human decision making. It goes back to that curation collection. It goes back to the question of maintaining information categories and metadata. So understand that DAM is about using human intelligence and effort in an efficient and smart way, not necessarily eliminating it altogether. The next step, evangelize to socialize. Anyone who's worked in DAM and worked trying to maintain and launch a DAM program knows how hard it can be to introduce and welcome adoption to it. A big goal of DAM often is to dismantle silos and unify effort, streamline effort across potentially disparate business units, businesses, companies, whether within a small organization or at the global enterprise level. In order to do that, in order to start working across all those different silos and business units and speak to different audiences, there definitely will be the need to take some proactive measures to make sure that everybody's aware of DAM, everybody is aware of its benefits, everybody is aware of the rules of the road, of how to use DAM, all that good stuff. And so the best way to get that word out is to evangelize it. There's a lot of different ways to pursue sort of communication strategy around DAM, but really the fundamental thing is to make sure you have one. Get it out there, get people talking, get the water cooler buzzing. All of that effort will pay off in spades in terms of people's familiarity with DAM, people's familiarity and potential support and buy-in to meeting the goals and efforts asked of the DAM program, and pay off over time as well. Next up, DAM in the information ecosystem. This goes back to a couple of the earlier points, coming at it from a slightly different angle. But really, you know, digital asset management is just one practice within that larger information management world. Knowing that information management touch on a plethora of topics and areas like records management, rights management, knowledge management, data, all sorts of different things. Ultimately, it goes back to understanding and protecting and managing and leveraging your environment, your company's intellectual property. So understanding how DAM sits within that wider context, how its goals complement these other types of goals, will really set you up with an opportunity to maximize and strengthen the DAM program in and of itself, and also complement its supplementary programs. And speaking of IP, that starts to get into how digital assets really do tie into basic brand equity. Each digital asset really, ultimately, at the end of the day, is a manifestation of your brand's identity and, in turn, equity. So it can be a little bit of a daisy chain sometimes to tell that story, but it's so important to be able to connect the dots between how one discrete picture and the investment and effort put in towards managing that picture or asset really does in turn connect to that broader story of telling your brand story, ensuring its equity, and it's ensuring its value, all the while mitigating any risks to your equity, brand equity. And from that, we can get into how assets really are your brand's building block for customer experiences. Customer experience is huge. It's so, you know, it's such a dominant topic across really all industries right now. Everybody wants to understand how to provide a captivating customer experience, whether you're B2B, B2C. It really doesn't matter. It's all about making sure your audiences have a positive experience with your brand. And that all goes back to encountering your brand, which goes back to encountering your brand's content and assets. So all of that is sort of the front end, user, consumer, audience-facing layer that your DAM strategy and your DAM program really should be serving to buttress. So all the work and effort put into your DAM strategy, it's so important to understand that and build that foundation in order to support what is ultimately going to be an outwardly facing, audience-friendly, positive customer experience. And then again, as we're thinking about all these amazing goals and really, meaty, exciting things to go after with digital asset management, it can be a lot to tackle. So it's really important to think about achieving that true maturity in stages over time. Thinking about DAM, a recurring theme around many of these different tips that we're talking about today really comes down to understanding DAM in that larger context and understanding it from a big picture perspective, which is great. But as you start to go about that and dig into things, it's also important to make sure you're taking a bit of a phased approach. You have clear goals and you have clear prioritization of those goals, and from that you can start to break things down and understand, well, what's realistic to achieve today, what's realistic to achieve tomorrow and work for, and what's realistic to work for and achieve a little bit further down the road, so that ultimately over a reasonable period of time you can really accomplish everything. DAM can be very complex. given that dam does have these different roots and tributaries stretching out into all sorts of different areas in the business and beyond, it's important to be able to stage things and understand what needs to come first and build a plan to go after it from that perspective. So based on that, we have come to the question period of our webinar. So I want to jump over and see if we have any questions. And looks like we have one right now, which is a pretty kind of classic question we've certainly encountered before. And it's simply, well, where to start is what I'm reading. Given all of these different components, what's the best place to start if you're trying to get a dam program off the ground? That's a great question, and it's, you know, not necessarily an easy one to answer, but I'll take a stab at it. An easy starting point, you know, I think going back to some of those initial slides that we had up around the 4 pillars that support digital asset management in terms of workflows and metadata strategy and technology strategy and governance. A key thing to doing dam right, in addition to everything we just spoke about, is understanding that you kind of need to go after everything somewhat in concert, which isn't to say there can't be a sequentiality to it, but that it can't be too linear. You really need to kind of think about everything in relation to each other and build out from there. That said, a true starting point, introductory steps, making that business case that always be front and center, that should guide any pursuit you're doing. And as part of that, quick follows are 2 things. One, that governance and oversight layer, so that, you know, for clear reasons, ties pretty tightly with making the business case and just understanding how DAM fits into your business, understanding that bigger picture, defining those goals, and then understanding how that can be massaged and tweaked a little bit to start thinking about it from a governance perspective and a program management perspective as you start to implement and pursue everything. So governance is a really important place to start. The other great place to start is around metadata and technology strategy. Chances are, you know, there's a lot of information already in place and being actively used in terms of how assets are stored, described, how files are named, the names of the folders are being kept down, where they're being kept right now. So there's a lot of data points potentially to leverage, and the sooner that you can start wrapping your hands around that, understanding that, building a strategy out of that, that's a great sort of, you know, first step tool to start to build that ultimately you can evolve and deploy in any sort of actual technology system or strategy that you have going with your digital asset management program. And looking at it, I think that is actually the only question we have received so far. I'll leave another one last quick call to see if anybody else has questions, if they want to go ahead and type them into the little control panel on the webinar screen. And if not, I think we'll just go ahead and mention, you may or may not already be aware, but pretty exciting at Optimity, we have just published a book all around digital content strategies, including digital asset management. It's called Inform, Transform, and Outperform. It's authored by John Horodisky and a few other team members here at Optimity. So highly recommend, please reach out to us if anybody is interested in more information about the book or the different particular topics addressed in the book. Love to be able to share more information about that. But if that's it, I'd really like to thank everybody for joining. Really appreciate your time. As I mentioned before, this webinar has been recorded, so we will be distributing the link to it along with all this contact information. So if anybody has any questions or is looking for additional information, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thanks again. Really appreciate everyone's time today. And with that, we'll close this out. Thanks so much.